Hello, everybody. Welcome back to EngageEDPodcast. I am your host, April Kirkendall. And as you can see by the title of this episode, we're going to be talking about engaging students in the digital age. Now, I know you're probably thinking this episode is going to be all about what strategies I can use or what strategies I'm going to give you to help decrease the use of digital use in the classroom, but this isn't going to be that type of episode. I'm going to teach you how to take what the students are bringing in the classroom and how to use it as a tool. So let's go ahead and get into it. Students having digital tools in the classroom is not a negative thing. Don't take this as a negative aspect of the classroom. And when I say digital tools, I mean, number one, their cell phones, right? Their tablets, their computers, their smartwatches, their cameras, their AirPods. They have all of these different digital tools that they're bringing in the classroom, and we don't have all the time in the day to consistently tell them, hey, put that away, focus on your work. I'm going to take your phone. Who has time to do that all day? You have to teach at some point, right? So, being that the students love being on their phones and love listening to music with their earphones or love sitting in class with their earphones, let's give them something educational that they can use and reinforce with those tools and use those tools as a reinforcement. I'm going to tell you all a story before I get started with today's segments. It's kind of funny that I have a podcast now because 2 years ago, when I first started teaching at my previous school, I started a podcast as a project for my students. It was mid-school year. I believe it was right before a big holiday. And usually before a big holiday, I'll give an exam, but typically it's like a project, something that the students can work on, engage with working groups, and learn something from it. And then I'll do assessments when it's not during the holiday season. And those will be formative assessments. So for this particular assessment, it was a podcast. And I had this brilliant idea. I didn't know how it was going to work out, if it was going to actually be successful. But it turns out the kids had a lot of fun with it and it was successful. So this is what we did. So I assigned this to each class. I was teaching Spanish 1 and Spanish 2 at the time. So these are 9th graders and 10th graders and then some 11th graders sprinkled in there, right? For Spanish 2. So I'm a big technology person. I'm all about technology and innovation and what's new and how I can learn it faster and learn how to use it in my everyday life. So I would highly use technology in my classroom and just use whatever the students were bringing in the classroom and use that to my advantage. So one of the tools that I would use was this website called Class Dojo. Depending on what the culture of your classroom is, this may or may not work for you, but 9 times out of 10 it will. I was teaching a language class, so I would have to pretty much force my students to speak. The students were very afraid to speak. They weren't as confident in the beginning of the school year speaking aloud in English or Spanish compared to how they were once the school year ended. So what I would do to increase engagement was I would use this website. And what Class Dojo is, you can manually enter the roster of your students, and then it will randomize the students into groups of how many ever people you need in each group. And if you have a student who isn't getting along well with another student that was placed in their randomized group, you can filter the groups on Class Dojo's website to set it up where they don't sit together. So it's a really cool site and it's free. So I randomized the groups. I believe this was a pretty big, well, all of my classes were pretty big during this time, but I think I had maybe 6 or 7 groups. And that was their podcast. They had a podcast group, right? So after I created the groups, I had each group to come together and discuss, what do you want to talk about in your podcast? What is your topic? So I gave them a set time to come up with their topic, and then they had to think of a name. So based on their topic, they had to find vocabulary words, a list of vocabulary words that they were going to use, and then they would create sentences. So once we got to the sentence portion, I created a Google Doc and I shared the link with all the students, and each group had their own Google Doc, and then they would all work collaboratively together on that document. And they would just add sentences that they wanted to use with the vocabulary, and then they had to place it in order of whatever made sense. And so the stories, some of them made sense, some of them didn't, but the point of the assignment or the project was for them to use vocabulary, to build community, to work together, and to use language, which was all met at the end of the assessment. Once the students had their sentences written out, I had them practice saying the sentences aloud with their classmates. So this was a reading, writing, speaking, and listening portion of this assessment. So there were a lot of tools that the students used, and there were a lot of ways that I could assess them and see if they were meeting their standards. Once the students felt comfortable saying the sentences aloud, then I recorded them on our school's podcast software. The school that I was working for actually received a grant for podcast equipment, and I was the first teacher to use that equipment and to put it to use and to start a podcast as a formative assessment. So it was a really cool idea. It's something that I just thought of out of the blue. I've always wanted to start a podcast. The students were really not sure about it at first. When I introduced them to the idea, they were like, you want us to do what? Like, have you all ever experienced anything like that in your work life where you have an idea, you know it's going to come together, you know it's going to come into fruition, you don't know how, but you know it's going to all work out in the end? That's how it felt with this class podcast. And it was just so fun seeing them work together. I actually created the digital art for each one of the groups. They gave me their title, their topics, and I created a digital art for them because I placed it on my class's YouTube as the audio overlay over the digital artwork. So the cover art for it. So if you all want to check that out, I'm going to try my best to find that YouTube link, and I'll place it in the show notes if you all want to hear how those stories panned out. That leads us into our first discussion topic for our first segment, Engage ED updates. So today's article comes from eSchool News, and it's all about AI and how to use it in the classroom. So the title of the article is How AI Tutoring Personalizes Learning for Students. So this article expresses how AI can be used to facilitate individualized educational plans, and that could be for anyone. So specifically, the article was talking about ChatGPT and how you can use certain prompts to request for an individualized plan for a specific student to meet their needs. You can use it to match their learning style. And this is for tutoring specifically. So if you're not sure what AI is, AI stands for artificial intelligence. And this artificial intelligence has been around since the 1980s, but currently it has become more prominent and gained more popularity within the last couple of years. And specifically within the past year, ChatGPT has been the talk of the town. So I use ChatGPT every day. There are so many things that you can use ChatGPT for. You can use it to help you write outlines. You can use it to help you correct grammar. You can ask its opinion on certain topics. pretty much anything that a genius can do, I feel like ChatGPT can do for you. It's like an assistant. You can tell it what you want it to be, and it will be that for you. The more specific you are with it, the more you will get out of the program. So I think that using AI in tutoring or in school specifically is a revolutionary idea because it is changing the way that we teach. It is changing the way that we learn. So I'm not sure, the article didn't state which AI program it uses, but it provides adaptive feedback to the student based on whatever needs that needs to be met. And I think that is transformative technology because we all could use feedback, and to know specifically what we need to work on, we have no choice but to be better. This system that they're using also tracks the students' progress, and it gives them different engagement tools that they can use to help better learn the material, and rewards them when they do well, gives them interactive challenges to improve on whatever skill they're working on. Okay, so we're going to get into like a quick little Q&A with this article. While reading this article, people may ask, with this AI, how do we feel about the potential for AI tutors to replace human teachers in certain aspects of education? Well, since I use it every day, I have pretty much a well-rounded view on this. I don't think that it will replace teachers or tutors. I believe that it will aid as a tool for them to use to help better fit the need for the students. A lot of the times in the classroom or just in a tutoring setting, you are serving more than one student, right? And this can be used in adult education as well. So if you're serving more than one student, 9 times out of 10, their learning styles will be different, and they may have individualized educational plans, which means that they require more attention for you during their learning process. So if you can get from step 1 to step 10 with your planning on how you can best assist them, why not use AI? You have to tell AI everything for them to regurgitate and give you the correct information. But you still need that human interaction to build a relationship and establish that connection when you are in your educational journey. So no, I don't think that AI is going to replace humans. If anything, it's going to make humans better. Another question that I have been seeing a lot from different articles about AI being used in school is, how is it going to create a disparity between students from different socioeconomic backgrounds? Well, this is a really good question because I was reading an article earlier about a school in Europe, and some of the students don't have access to AI, and the article was complete opposite of what this article was saying. It was saying that they want to use AI. The students want the teachers to teach them, but they don't have the tools. They are not financially able to provide those tools where they can teach them AI. So I'm not really sure how the educational system is compared to America, where like you can download free apps as we can there. I can only imagine that it's the same, but I know that once you cross different countries, there are different regulations. So it may not be the same, but the AI that I use every day is free. So more research needs to be done in those communities that have different socioeconomic backgrounds, because if it's free, then I guess the conversation will be about the availability of the actual resource, the computers, the internet. That will be the actual question at hand. How can schools ensure that AI tutoring systems are accessible and beneficial to all students, including those with learning disabilities? Great question. So I believe that schools can ensure that AI tutoring systems are accessible and beneficial to all students, including students with learning disabilities, by providing the resource on their devices and showing them how to use it. The system that I use, you can speak into it and it'll speak back to you. You don't even have to type into it. So think of those students who may not be able to spell as well as other students. They can say what they need to say, right? Or they can maybe ask a student to help them type it or say it, and then they'll listen or they can read it. There's a lot of different ways you can get creative with AI or with ChatGPT specifically. You can get creative with your prompts and how to enter in the information and receive it. So I think it just goes into teaching the students how to use it and just going from there. It's not a learning management system like Schoology or Canvas, but if you think of it as, where teachers have to teach students how to use these learning management systems each school year, it's kind of similar, except for it's like a chatting back and forth with a chatbot versus learning an entire system. So it should be easier when you think about it like that. What are the potential long-term impacts of relying heavily on AI for educational purposes on future generations? Here's the thing with this question. So we can't control what people do with their time, right? If you choose to rely on AI heavily and you start to not think for yourself, then that's on you, right? You are choosing to not think critically. Now, if you are one of those people who have your own ideas, you're critically thinking, and you are only using ChatGPT or AI specifically you're using it as a resource, and that's different. That's not relying heavily on the technology. You're just using it to make whatever you are saying better or whatever idea you have better. You're not actually replacing what you are putting out into the world. When I read this question, I think of it as there was a shift in the school system. In 2017, I saw a shift. I've been working as a teacher for a little over 6 years, but I've been working with children specifically since 2011. So I've been working with children for a little over 12 years. So that's a pretty long time. So I've seen a lot of changes. I saw a shift during the pandemic. When the students came back after the pandemic was quote unquote over, right? They struggled thinking critically. I saw this before the pandemic started, like in 2017 when I first started teaching. I just saw how like the students really were using their phones for everything. They Googled literally everything and they didn't want to think on their own. And that was one of the things that I always stress in my classroom is to think critically. There was no way a student left my classroom and they did not critically think for the day. So I would ask them a question and then they would have to build upon that. They gave me a response. I asked another question. So the pandemic really did a number on these kids where they pretty much used the internet to find all their answers. They weren't turning in work. So it really put a damper on their education and the integrity of just being a scholar. So I think of AI like that. If you are relying heavily on this tool, at some point, you're not going to be thinking for yourself, right? So it's up to you to choose if you want to use it as a resource or use it to replace what you naturally already have inside of you, right? Everything that we know or everything that we want to produce, it's already inside of us. Do you all know that what we want to produce out into this world, it's already inside of us? We don't need anyone to tell us what to do. Deep down, we already know, but we just have to start. If we go ahead and start, then we'll know what our purpose is, what it is we want to say. So you don't technically need to go and have something tell you what to do. You tell it what you want to do, and then you use it as a resource and help build upon your idea. That is the correct way to use that. That's what I found the correct way is. And you're still critically thinking. It's helping you brainstorm. It's helping you create material at a higher capacity. And that can be applied in any discipline. You can use that across the board. You can apply that to life. You can apply that to school, your educational career. You can apply that to your job. It's already in you. You just have to do it. We're going to go ahead and transition to our next segment, Ayúdame a abrir Q&A. Before I get into our topic for this segment, if you all have any questions on any topics that I cover or relating to education or personal development in general, please send me an email to EngageEDPodcast@gmail.com. I would like to read your messages and give you advice on one of the episodes. So I think that would be really fun. So if it's something that you're struggling with, or that you're just kind of on the fence about, or you just need help figuring it out, just send me an email and you may receive your answer right here on this podcast. So today's post comes from Physics Lens. And the topic of her post says, seeking tips after visit from the principal for engaging digital tools in my classroom. She categorized herself as a new teacher. She says, "Hey, fellow teachers. I'm a young aspiring teacher from Europe, and I'm feeling a bit disheartened after a recent visit from my school principal. You see, I'm new to this school and teaching in general, first half year after my seminar school, but so far, I've been lucky enough to build a great rapport with my students. They genuinely seem to love my classes, and their positive feedback has been my driving force in my first half year at the school. However, during the principal's visit to one of my ninth grade lectures, while he did acknowledge my friendly approach and teaching style, he raised a concern. He expressed his disappointment in my lack of digital media in the classroom. It hit me hard, especially since he only saw one class of mine. As a new teacher, I already feel overwhelmed by the countless tasks. Right now, I have to write 24 certificates for the end of the year and responsibilities that come with the job. The visit from my principal made me question myself a little bit and my ability to meet the expectations of modern education. I know PowerPoint has their place, and I've used it in some of my classes for the introduction. Unfortunately, not in that class the principal visited. If you could share tips or suggestions that are relatively quick and easy to implement, you would help me immensely. My subjects are math and physics, if that matters. Any tips are appreciated." Okay, so the first point that I want to get into is that the principal only visited one class. So a piece of the feedback that your principal should have given you was that, hey, I don't think that was a strong class. I don't think they were as focused as I had imagined they would be. So let me come to a different class period of yours. And then they could have compared the two or come on a different day. So I don't think that was fair to the teacher, but teachers and principals have their own caseload of work that they have to do, so that may not have been feasible for the principal to do. So let's go ahead and get into the disappointment of digital media. So PowerPoint, and this, for context, this post was just a year ago. So in 2023, it's not like we're in 2009 and we have to use PowerPoint. There are a lot of free tools out there for everyone to use. So I'm going to give you some today. So here's the thing. In this post, the teacher says that the principal made them question themselves a little bit. Remember earlier when I was telling you what we want to do is already inside of us? So this teacher is a physics and a math teacher. This is your expertise, right? No one can come to me and say and tell me how I'm going to teach my class, right? I'm the expert in my topic or in my course. So no one can tell you how to teach your class. You already know the material. You just need better tools. So you feel comfortable using PowerPoint. So here are some options for you that you don't have to reinvent the wheel with or reinvent the wheel for. Students love games. They love gamified situations in the classroom. So one of the things that I would always use in my classroom was Kahoot. Kahoot.com. If you don't know about Kahoot, you need to go to it right now. It is a very fun tool that you can use by yourself. You can use it as a study tool. You can use it in your classroom. You can use it with your family. There are sets of games already uploaded on the website, or you can create your own game and you can add images that are related to whatever text or content that is in your set of games. So they have different categories on the website, and it goes from trivia to math to science and languages to whatever you can think of. So Kahoot will be a really great way because it's set up as like flashcards. When I think of PowerPoint, I think of flashcards because it's just a board, right? And so whatever you're placing on there, it has to go somewhere. It can't just be you teaching from a slide. Where is the student interaction coming from, right? So one thing that I always stress to educators is to keep a student-centered approach in your classroom. It's all about the students. Yes, you are the expert in your craft, right? You are the expert physics and math teacher. But to get successful engagement out of your students, you have to learn what they like to do. And every class period may not be the same. What works for one class period may not work for the other. That's why I say at the beginning of the school year in the last episode, go back and watch my last episode. I talked about building a rapport with the students and the parents. Figure out what they like to do. Are they always on their phone? Okay, well, here's a Kahoot. You can play on your phone and join. No matter what age they are, I've taught middle school and high school. All of those kids love Kahoot. They love competing against each other. They love when they win. They love to see what rank they have in the game. And then even if you play another game, they want to play it again and they don't want to stop. So it's a fun way to learn the material and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So whatever is on your PowerPoint, just create it into a game. Literally, it's like a flashcard. You have on one side, on your first column, you have your text or your answer, and then on the other column, you have your response or your text. However you want to place it, and you can place an image with that, and you can add music. You can get really creative with it. Figure out what type of music they like, and you just give them a link and then they join on their phones and boom, they love being on their phones anyway. So why not make it out of a game? And this is a formative assessment if you didn't know this. I would give grades on this. And this is like, I would see who joined. Okay. You can have them join with nicknames. You can have them join with real names, but this is a great way to get that engagement up. And then when your principal comes back in, they can see that you are incorporating technology in your classroom. You don't have to feel any type of way or insecure about your skills because, hello, you're an expert at your craft. You just need better tools. Also, specifically for the physics, science, math world, there's a website called PhET Interactive Simulations, and it's a virtual lab with simulations, and it helps students figure out how to visualize those complex concepts. This is a really great way to reinforce what you're teaching them because it's going to stick. Every student, like I talked about earlier, every student has different learning styles. So you have to make sure that you appeal to all students, not just one learning style. Teaching from a PowerPoint may not work for everyone. Because like for me specifically, I'm a hands-on learner. Teaching from a PowerPoint, that's boring to me. I may fall asleep. I need to have a discussion with a classmate, or I need to stand up and do something, learning the skill with my hands. So, or watching a video of someone doing it. So this is another great way, PhET Interactive Simulations. I don't want to give too many options, but another way that this teacher could incorporate technology that is just not going overboard like past PowerPoint is interactive whiteboards. So depending on what type of school you're in, if you still have a chalkboard or if you have a whiteboard or interactive whiteboard, like those are the tiers to the classroom, how it has transitioned from like back in the day to not so long ago to currently, we have those interactive whiteboards where we can write on a screen and it's going to mimic our handwriting. So have those students come up to the board and show you how to work out those complex concepts of physics or how to calculate this math equation. Show them or have them teach one of the concepts to the students. These are all great ways. Use your students to your advantage. They love showing off with their friends and showing what they know. Even if they are not as confident, when they see someone else go up, that 9 times out of 10, they're probably going to go up the next class or so on. You don't always have to do all the work. You can use your students to help you as well in the classroom and make it fun. Fun and interactive. As long as you're engaging, they're going to be learning. Remember that. Quizlet is another great way. It mimics PowerPoint. I would say that Quizlet is one of the old school websites. I actually used to use Quizlet in college back in the day, but it's still around and the students use it. There are a lot of websites that mimic it, but Quizlet was the first one around. And it has come a long way. It's not just like a flashcard website anymore where you have your text or concept or whatever you were learning and then the response to it, the answer. Now you can quiz yourself, interactive games on there. You can add images. There are a lot of different games on Quizlet now. And you can also share a link with your class and you can play along collaboratively if you're not doing it alone. So Quizlet has come a long way. So that's another way that this teacher could incorporate digital technology into his classroom. We're going to go ahead and move on to our last segment, language learning gems. When is the last time that you read in a foreign language? An article, a book? Last school year was the first time that I actually read, 4 novels in Spanish with my class. I say last year because previously I was afraid to do that. When you ask students to read in Spanish, like an actual book, it's just very off-putting. But similar to when I introduced the idea of starting a podcast, the very following school year, I introduced to students that we were going to be reading books in Spanish and we were going to be reading them from beginning to the end. Now, previously we did read Spanish text. It just wasn't like the entire book. It would be paragraphs and portions from the book, but we wouldn't actually finish the book. And I'm going to give you a website that I use for this. And this website just really gave me the confidence to push my students and to push myself to take our learning to another level. So the website is called flangoo.com. It's FLANGOO.com. You do have to pay for this website. It's not free. My school set up a subscription for my class, so that is how I was able to use it. But they do have 3 languages on the website. The languages are Spanish, German, and French. And they have authentic Spanish texts on the site, and they are topics of pretty much anything you can think of. And they have topics that are specifically for different age groups. And they also have biographies on there as well. Like, for example, one of the books that we read, I believe it wasn't a book, it was an article on Kobe Bryant and his family, but it was in Spanish. And so they would give you vocabulary that you would learn. And then we would go over the vocabulary. We would write it in our notebooks. We would practice using it. We would get used to the vocabulary first. And then we would go back to the text. And I would have the students annotate the text. And that was one of the tools that I taught them, how to annotate text to learn language and to reinforce what you already know. So they would annotate the language. And when I say annotate, I don't mean like, yes, write notes in the margins, but also words that you don't know, words that you do know, new words, highlight those in 3 different colors, write what they mean. If it's something that you don't understand, write in the margins, and then build upon that. The website gives you comprehension questions for each chapter or for each article. And the questions, everything is in Spanish. So it forces the student to learn and use the language and use the knowledge that they already know to build upon what they already know. So it's a really fun site. I really loved using Flangu. But if you are not able to get a subscription with that, no worries. I've got some super exciting news for you all. My new ebook, Entre Dos Mundos, Between Two Worlds, is dropping soon. I know some of you aren't into subscribing to online book catalogs, so I'm keeping it simple for you all. This book is all about the wild and beautiful journey through Spain and Portugal. It's packed with adventures, growth, and some serious cultural vibes. And guess what? You can get it in Spanish or English. No subscriptions, no hassle. Just straight up good reading. Keep an eye on my socials for the release date and how to snag your copy. Follow me at EngageEDPodcast on Instagram. Thanks for all the love and support. I can't wait for you to dive into Entre Dos Mundos. Stay tuned. You can use newspaper clippings. You can use materials like you can find them on Google. Authentic materials, depending on whatever your topic is. Like, for example, my Ab Initio 11 students, and when I say Ab Initio, it's a higher level Spanish course in the International Baccalaureate program. So the students, we were reviewing how to identify a person. So I had students go and find authentic driver's license from different Spanish speaking countries, and then we would go through each driver's license and we would compare, which country is different from the other. Like some countries would have their blood type on their driver's license, or some countries would have their date of birth written differently. So they would have their social security number or their identification number on there, and some countries did not. So we would go and we would actually discuss that in Spanish and have a discussion about what it has, what it doesn't have. And that is authentic. As long as it's an authentic text, you can use that. And it was free. It was on Google. I didn't have to pay for it. So when you think of these resources, there are a lot of free resources that you can find online. You can go to Pinterest and find poems online that are authentic text, and then work with your students. Print those out and then work, or you can use it online. And there are a lot of ways that you can integrate technology into your classroom, and it doesn't just have to all come from one source. So just think about what authentic materials you want to use and just get creative. So those are just a few ideas. So that's it for today's topics, you guys. I really enjoyed spending this time with you today. We may or may not be taking a mid-season break. Next week, my babies will be turning 1, so we'll be celebrating their first birthday, and we're going to be having family coming into town. So I'm going to take just a mid-season break, and then I'll be back within a week or two. So if I do have time to record, I may publish an episode, but if not, this is my disclaimer. So, however, what we will be talking about when I return is fostering parental involvement. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, how to improve parental involvement in the educational experience. So that's what we're going to be talking about the next time we see each other again. I just want to thank you all so much for your support. Thank you for everyone that has been watching the podcast online, streaming and downloading the episodes on your favorite podcast platform. Please remember to rate and review the podcast on whatever podcast platform you are listening on. And please, please, please share the podcast with a friend or family member. I'm trying to get my downloads up. So, and plus they'll be listening to some great content, and they may learn something that they didn't think that they needed to know. So please share it with someone. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and to comment below. You can ask your questions in the comments as well. If you have questions that you want to be answered on the Ayúdame Abril Q&A, please email EngageEDPodcast@gmail.com. And I do want to leave you all with something to think about before we see each other again. How are you going to embrace life today? Really sit and think about that. How are you going to embrace life today? I want you to remember to savor every moment, feel all the feels, and just do you. You are already an expert in your craft. Just continue to stay present in whatever community you're in. Stay true to yourself and stay engaged. You got this.